The Steam controller price and release date are finally confirmed. The review embargo is lifted and most of the reviews are very positive. I really have nothing to add to that. I don't have the controller and I don't want to ramble about something I've not touched with my own hands. And I'm definitely buying it. I think the price is right. Am I crazy for thinking $99 is a fair price for what it has to offer, or does that feel expensive to you? But out of all the articles and info we have, there's also some information about the other devices. So Valve announced 3 new pieces of hardware over the last several months: the Steam controller, the Steam machine, the Steam frame, and they even hinted at a Steam Deck too. We're getting one of them on May 4th, so let's talk about where the rest of it is. Today we're not really talking about the Steam controller itself. Like I said, great reviews, $99, launches May 4th. Go watch somebody who actually has one. What I really wanted to talk about is everything buried inside the interviews and articles that came out alongside the controller announcement. So Valve's Pierre-Loup Griffais, I'm sorry my dude for butchering your name, he talked quite a bit about all the hardware, and if you read between the lines, there's a lot going on with the Steam machine, with the Steam frame, and yeah, even with the Steam Deck too. So, the Steam machine, originally supposed to launch in early 2026 alongside everything else. Then in February, Valve came out and basically said there is a global RAM and storage shortage, costs have gone up faster than we expected, and we need to rethink pricing and scheduling. That's understandable, supply chains are a bit of a mess right now. When IGN asked point blank whether the delay is purely a RAM thing or whether the machine just isn't ready yet, Valve's answer was pretty clear. Pierre said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that if you use the Steam Deck dock, the Steam machine experience is basically the same, and feature-wise it is complete. It's the Steam Deck plus more GPU horsepower, so the core experience exists, the Steam machine is done. It works, Valve is just sitting on it. They just don't know what to charge for it. But if it's basically a docked Steam Deck but stronger, is that enough to justify buying a whole new device? Let me know in the comments. I'm actually really interested what you think about that. Now, Insider Gaming's reporting gives us more context on the numbers. The original internal target was to keep the Steam machine under $800. And that pretty much lines up with what others have estimated, between $750 and $800 based on what the components cost were at the time of announcement in November. Whether that's still achievable, it's unclear, and speculation from various sources put it somewhere between $750 and $1,000 in today's market. Now that's a pretty big range, and none of it is confirmed, but $800 was apparently the ceiling Valve had in mind before the RAM crisis changed everything. Here's my take on the pricing situation. I think the number that actually matters isn't just the machine price, but is the machine plus the controller, because you are going to need one. That's the full living room setup. So if the machine costs $800, does that include the $99 for the controller, or does the controller put it around $900 total? If it remains $800 bundled with the controller, it's a much easier sell. Some argue that the controller now costs as much as it does because then you can bundle it with the machine without increasing the total cost of the bundle, making that a sweeter deal. In essence, the controller now costs more than what people expected, so that can make the Steam machine cost less than what people feared it would. Does that logic actually make sense to you, or am I overthinking the pricing here? Now, Griffais did say they're working with multiple RAM manufacturers to avoid being locked into one source, which is pretty smart. They're doing what they can. But he also acknowledged that memory prices are a global issue right now, and there's only so much Valve can do about that. The one genuinely hopeful signal is that Valve told IGN that news on the Steam machine is coming soon and the release is close. That's pretty vague, obviously, but the fact that they're saying it at all alongside the controller launch suggests they're not trying to delay indefinitely. They do want to get it out, but they also don't want to lose money on it. Now, Polygon's analysis piece was a bit more pessimistic, and honestly, I think they also make a fair point. The controller is launching May 4th. Valve's stated goal has been to ship all 3 products in the first half of 2026, and that gives them until the end of June, which is about 8 weeks from now. So launching a full mini PC that involves RAM procurement, shipping logistics, pricing decisions, and retail coordination in 8 weeks with no announcement yet, that seems pretty tight. I'm not going to say that the Steam machine is delayed to 2027, but I also wouldn't bet money on June. maybe towards the end of 2026 is a more realistic target. Okay, so moving on to the Steam frame, arguably the most important piece solely because of that ARM version of SteamOS, at least for me. The Steam frame is in the same product family and it has the same RAM problem. The main difference between the machine and the frame RAM is that the one on the frame is a unified memory integrated into the SoC, the ARM processor. It's much like how Apple Silicon handles its RAM. It's still affected by the RAM crisis, but not as much. Now here's some interesting info. Brad Lynch, sadly is Bradley on X, put out a tweet that really caught my eye. He said he's been told Valve had internal pricing targets before and after RAM prices skyrocketed, and that the machine is the most affected out of the three products. The frame, according to his sources, is not as bad, so the frame might actually be in a better position to hit the shelves compared to the Steam machine. The IGN piece even floated the idea that because the controller launched alone, the frame might do the same, launch independently on its own timeline without waiting for the machine to be ready. I previously talked about how a unified launch might be better for Valve in terms of logistics. However, Valve's Pierre-Loup Griffais himself confirmed that Valve is fine with having separate launches, so we might see a standalone launch for the frame and after that one for the Steam machine towards the end of the year. I'm thinking it's a lot more likely that we get the Steam frame next and the Steam machine last. Right, the Steam Deck 2. No release window, not even close to one, but Griffais did talk about it and what he said is worth paying attention to. When IGN asked him directly, he said, "We're hard at work on it, every step of the way. If you look at our hardware projects over the years, you can draw a straight line from the original Steam controller and Steam machine to Steam Deck, to everything we're announcing and shipping this year. And we expect Steam Deck 2 will be a lot of the same. A lot of what we're doing here will be learnings that build up to it." So the entire 2026 hardware push, the controller, the machine, the frame, it's essentially an R&D for Steam Deck 2. The SteamOS work, the input systems, the supply chain relationships, the manufacturing experience, all of it feeds into whatever comes next for the handheld, which is actually a smart way to frame it and does make sense historically. The original Steam controller and the original Steam machine genuinely did lead to the Steam Deck. Now Valve has made their performance philosophy very clear. Griffais said they're not interested in 20, 30 or even 50% more performance at the same battery life. They want something more significant than that. A real generational jump. And this is the part where I want to speculate a bit because I think this is the most interesting question around Steam Deck 2. What chip is it actually going to use? The Steam Deck runs on a custom AMD APU, Zen 2 cores, RDNA 2 graphics. It's starting to show its age now with more demanding titles, and the obvious next step would be a new AMD APU, Zen 4 or maybe Zen 5, RDNA 3 or RDNA 4. And there's been plenty of discussion about chips like the one powering the ROG Ally X or similar devices, but Griffais said earlier this year that there was no SoC available that he felt would truly deliver next-gen performance for a Steam Deck successor. Which makes me wonder whether Valve is actually considering going off the AMD x86 path entirely at some point. We've talked about ARM, and ARM-based chips have come a long way. The performance per watt on ARM is just in a different league compared to what x86 is doing right now. And obviously we know that Valve has worked on the ARM translation layer, as we talked about it in the past, but I still don't think that ARM chips are currently fast enough to get that more than 50% performance target for the same battery life. Unless Valve themselves are working on an in-house silicon, I just don't see it happening soon. But let me know what you think. Should they stick with x86 or go ARM? I think we have to wait and see what RDNA 5 on mobile APUs is going to offer, and that probably isn't arriving until 2027 at the earliest, so it seems more and more realistic that the Steam Deck 2 is a 2028 device at the earliest, and whether it's x86 or ARM is going to be a last-minute decision. 2028 seems ways off, but as I said in the past, I think one of the reasons and use cases for the Steam machine is to bridge that gap between the Steam Deck and the Steam Deck 2, to allow Valve to take their time and really nail the performance and battery targets of the new handheld device. The Steam Deck is still a great device, it's just really hard to get right now because of the same RAM shortage affecting everything else. But I have a question for you guys. Is 2028 way too late for you, or would you rather they take their time and get it right? That's what I have for you today. The Steam controller is out next week, reviews are good, and that part of the story is largely told. But the bigger picture is that Valve is juggling a lot right now. A mini PC that's ready but can be priced, a VR headset that might be next in line and holds the keys to ARM gaming, and a Steam Deck 2 that's still years out, waiting for silicon that can actually justify its existence. Griffais keeps saying things are going well, and maybe they are, but I'd feel better about that if we had a date or something other than the controller. So what do you guys think? Are you still interested in the Steam machine at whatever price it ends up landing at? Let me know down in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like. Subscribe for more Steam hardware and Steam Deck videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.